started.
Okay.
Okay, what is the 15th? We will call a meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, born and unborn.
And we will forego all of our other things because this is kind of a standalone meeting to work with Judge Beadham and our new auditor and arrive at a,
See what consensus we can reach.
yes.
Well, I want to appreciate everybody coming in early on a Monday. I brought donuts because I always was told if you made someone come to a meeting before 9, there better be donuts.
Oh,
Although I don't see anybody else here that are big donut people. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present about the court's budget. I know that this is Jeff's least favorite thing because, you know, the law says this is a county problem, but for when the state agrees to pay. For what it's worth, this, you know, we've got about 30 FTEs when you count the judges and everything. And last time I looked, that was in excess of $2.5 million in, you know, salaries, benefits that the state pays. And that's the first thing we get back for the, I guess it's about $90,000 that we send to the state with court fees. So we definitely get some benefit back from that. I had sent over some draft stuff and some narrative that goes along with it. A couple points I really wanted to make was, you know, for 2023, you know, we're seeing this monster increase in felony filings. And those are like the real numbers. When, you know, 2019, it's 677, it's over 1,000. We just starts with downstairs with how many people have to come through the associate circuit side, and then they come upstairs. And, you know, from a workload, and we have this scientific analysis that the OSCA gives us, we're looking at 2 judges that do nothing, that should be doing nothing but criminal. And I think we're at 6.29 judge need for 5 judges. And then because of the associate circuit split, it's really more like we need 4.5 circuit judges and we have 3. So now we know why everybody's busy. And of course, you know, the concern you always have is you don't spend enough time with the case that needs to have the time there. But that's very real. The second thing that's happened to us is that we inherited the Monsanto litigation. Now, when it was 1,200 cases from the city of St. Louis, we thought that. But Donnell tells me that it's probably going to be in excess of 4,000 cases that they've all decided to file here, and because the legislature doesn't like class action lawsuits, it's 4,000 plus individual cases. Now, the good news is there's not a file folder for every one of these. But to put that in context, our circuit caseload's 2,000. So now I think that to us, we do get $9 a case.
I was going to ask that question if.
I don't think those numbers are necessarily in here because it's a kind of a one-time bump.
Right.
You don't get that every year, and I can't imagine. But to give you an example, if you take the clerk-weighted workload and you spread this over 3 years, that's 6 clerks just to do this work. If you think about it, one lawyer changes on the defense side, and that's 4,000 entries, you know, just with that. So those are 2 things that are happening. That's the third thing, of course, that we've got a new circuit clerk for 2023, and that's in and of itself, any change like that is with some challenges. So that's sort of the context that we want to present this. And then if you've got the budget pages in front of you, you know, we've estimated some increase in civil fees. The rest of it are essentially, you know, kind of increase for the minor increases that we have there. We have been able to recover $6,700 in pretrial, and somewhere we have $15,000 in money that we got for pretrial that we've never spent because they can't reach an agreement on how it's supposed to be spent. It was a way to get pretrial people into drug treatment early, and that's about all I understand about it. But it's not, it's money that we've received somewhere and it shows up in the 2021 as receipts or revenues, I think is how you guys describe it here, and we've not spent it. So it's floating around there somewhere in terms of getting that. So that's, from the revenue side, we have really very little control over it.
Have me make another copy too. I'll scroll through. Sorry about that, Judge.
Okay. But that's, what we kind of think revenue is going to look like. There'll be a bump on these cases, but I don't think I really hope this is not like every year. The interesting thing about it from the OSCA point of view, it'll be 3 years before this reflects in our workload in terms of how they allocate staff. So I think it's just going to be a lot of work and for the clerk's office primarily.
Judge, do you see these, we're going to sit here a year from today, or thereabouts, for the next budget. Will we still be talking about those cases then?
I think we'll have those cases. I can't contemplate they'd be resolved in a year, and so I think the clerk load is still there. There's no more revenue to be associated with it because the filing fee is done. We really don't, have any idea of what this is. I've got a couple class action lawsuits. I know Judge Walker's got a couple class action lawsuits, but that's 4,000 plaintiffs in one lawsuit. And these are all individual cases. Son and daughter on behalf of late father who used Roundup is kind of what they look like. So we're not really sure what to expect. But I know Judge Green's got them. He's working with the groups. We've talked to OSCA. So they're in the middle of changing their system. So they're not excited about making any changes to the old system, and they're not quite ready to make changes for the new system to make changes there. But we've been in contact with them to saying, is there an IT assistance? I don't think there's an IT solution to this, but is there an IT assistance that you could give us that would help this? Otherwise, you have to accept in 4,000 changes. So that's just kind of what's working on our end. I've been trying to figure out why we are so behind. I could blame COVID for some of it, and to the extent we have jury trials, COVID's some of it, but mainly it's resources. I can have one jury trial pretty much at a time in the courthouse. To the extent that we're trying to do criminal jury trials in custody, but those will often plead at the last minute, but I've got to waive off the civil trial several weeks in advance because nobody can afford that. They can't just wait till the Sunday night before and say, oh, sorry, you don't get to go. So, we are actively exploring an off-site venue, because if I could get an off-site venue that we could conduct jury trials on a regular basis, then I would go get a senior judge to come in here and see if we can knock some of these down. Because my 2023 docket, there's probably 19 cases. I just don't have any room to set.
Was it a successful venture with the federal?
The federal courthouse worked well. I don't know, and I'm going to go back and say, hey, I got some more cases. Would you let us try them? At some point, they're probably going to come back to ask for some economic support and I think it'd be well worth the money.
But it's very expensive, because when we were doing the windows, I was looking for other sources, because I think we were supposed to have some jury
Right.
trials. And I ended up talking with one of the judges out of Kansas City, and the cost that he quoted me was something like $4,000 a day.
Yeah, they've been very
And I'm
kind.
like-
They've been very kind to us in terms of that. But here's what we did: we picked the jury here, okay? So that, and how long, and that load, because that's, I think in this case we picked 300 people, 300 plus people. That's through their security and in their building and using their resources. So my agreement was we picked the jury here, and if we needed to deliberate in the evenings, we would do that here. So we're there 8 to 5, which is kind of inconvenient from a trial point of view, because when you get to 5 o'clock, I just got 3 more questions. Well, it's really never 3 more questions. It's 5 or 6 more questions, and all of a sudden it's 5:30. And the one thing that the Fed said that they could not deal with was overtime. So, I mean, it took some changes in how we tried the case to make it fit within that. But we're going to explore doing some more. That's probably not a long-term solution, but that's probably a short-term solution because we still have a bunch of people in jail that need tried. But, you know, if we could find a, you know, I need a room to try the case in, and it doesn't have to be much bigger than, say, Judge Green's office or hearing room, okay? But I gotta have enough space for the jury, and I gotta have a couple places for the lawyers, for the plaintiff and lawyers for the defendant to assemble. So, you know, there's not been a lot of venues that we've found like that.
Is the red building across from the Capitol an option?
Well, they don't have, they don't have a jury box. And secondly, they don't have the sort of breakout rooms that you need. I made some preliminary inquiries in there, and, you know, the problem is trying the case is not so bad. We try cases in here, particularly non-jury cases. We've tried in here before, and we will probably be trying more as we go through stuff. But, you know, juries then that's another 15 people that are in the building. It adds to the staff you have to support it. Donna went over to the federal courthouse every day. I took Scott with me. We used Donnie Schulte a couple days when we had a lot of transition work. So it's a lot of load on your building. We looked at the city. The city's got a courtroom and they have a jury box, but they don't have anywhere to assemble the jury. There's nowhere to stick the lawyers for the plaintiff and the defendant. So, I mean, that's, you know, we've looked at that, but we talked to the schools. The schools were sort of excited, then they weren't excited, and then it's really 2 months out of the summer that they're not using, let's say, Miller Performing Arts. So I've looked over at, you know, I looked at Missouri Chamber of Commerce because they've got it's more of a gallery than it is a courtroom, but at least you could see. And you know, we looked at that, but I haven't talked to them much further than that because I don't know. Like I said, I need a place to put the defendant and their lawyers and the plaintiffs and their lawyers. So we're looking, we're exploring. There's a couple churches we talked to, they weren't really excited about the idea. But it really takes, like I said, the room to try the case itself is not so bad. You gotta have room to sit a jury. But it's the breakout areas that you gotta have.
There's a couple of hearing rooms in the Capitol that might, I don't know if you can put judicial in a legislative
Well, there
building.
there is this thing called separation of powers. I don't know whether that comes in there, but you know, but we're looking at some venues. We looked at, you know, entertainment venue out on Industrial Drive, but we were still lacking in being able to break out the various areas. But that's just so you know, that's what we're working on. So, do you have any more questions about that? I'd say let's look at the expense side.
Yep.
So I'm on what says 2 out of 3.
I can't believe our new TV is, that just really upsets me. I'm like, God.
And to assist with the microfilming, and there's still microfilming being done. Donnell asked for that to continue as a half FTE to still use those resources. I cranked it up to a full FTE of part-time, so, or I guess a half FTE of part-time, $16 an hour, 1,000 hours a year. I just think we're gonna need some more help in the clerk's office, and as we transition through there, maybe this is a position we get that focuses on the county reimbursement side. Because I know that there's a lot of clerical work that's associated with doing the jail buildings and the things like that. And maybe should be the focus of that person. But we've not been able to use a whole lot because of COVID and, I mean, you know, trying to get people in the building, so we didn't spend a whole lot last year. But that's why we're asking for $16,000 in that budget line. which kind of reflects what the market's doing with part-time, where we were at $13.50, now we're at $16 an hour. The rest of the expenses, material and supplies in the clerk's office is essentially what it was before. If it's incremented, it's incremented for, you know, the cost of inflation. We're noticing some things there. So that's for the clerk's office. The next line item down is for the court itself. If you recall, we transferred the insurance budget to training meetings dues because we're gonna have to send some people to some trainings. For example, to try to move some work from the circuit side down the associate circuit side, I sent Judge Stumpy to the family law conference to learn about doing family law, which is a large portion of what we do in circuit. Equipment maintenance, this is the line item that they pay for the court reporters, machines, so maintenance of those machines, that equipment, and the software licenses. And like I said, we expect it to go up a little bit, and that's why we raised that line from $2,900 to $3,500. But that's the software license for the software, and then the periodic maintenance that we do on their machines, the stenograph machines. Jury script remains the same. Meetings, travels, and dues, we didn't get to do as much as we'd like to. I'm probably going to have to send another judge to capital litigation school when that becomes available, because right now the only judge that's been. Office supplies kind of remains the same. Professional services, we haven't had to pay very much out of it, but if we've got to hire a court reporter or something else like that to cover something, that's where we would use for those services. So we ask that remain the same. The next line down is pretrial. And as I kind of explained it in the narrative, what we're proposing, I asked Mark to kind of figure out what sort of COLA you're going to increment.
I put in 4%.
Okay.
Of course, that'd be subject to change.
Well, I mean,
And that's just kind of a,
right, I know that's
just
it's a placeholder.
Right, and that's all I'm saying here. In pretrial, we've already boosted the salaries in pretrial. We've got several legacy people which are there, but I think when we go to hire in, we're probably going to hire in lower, as we were looking at what that position has sort of become. When we started that position, they were deputy marshals, they were post-certified. As we're finding the better people to do the work, they look more like probation and parole officers. And of which then I think that we can be competitive with that market at a lesser number. So that's why for this group, we're proposing cost of living.
Okay, so on the sheet that you emailed us, there was 2 columns, the
Right.
charity salary.
Right.
But
What-
you're just proposing COLA this year for the
Right.
trial. Okay.
Right, because we've got a lot of people, we got a lot of legacy people at a fairly strong salary. I included in the narratives from both pretrial and court security, this discussion of what parity, and typically we've had parity with the sheriff's department, okay? And when Judge Walker and when we looked at the salaries in pretrial, we looked at the job functions itself, which I guess we're gonna have to re-edit. We thought that we were probably okay with those salaries with a cost of living adjustment, which whatever the county comes to on that.
Okay.
So, but I include in the narrative is what it would look like with parity with the sheriff's department.
Yeah, I saw that, right.
Yeah.
So, and this is, sort of like Jeff is always fond of talking about, you kind of have to eat an elephant in bites to do that. The next line, this is pretrial. The other thing in pretrial that we're asking you to consider is we've got we got a half FTE, that's Mary Ann, and she does sort of all the bookkeeping for that department. Two things are gonna happen in pretrial, one of which is, well, I think we've got the software bid incoming for the monitoring software, and we think that that will probably help. But where we could really use some help is sometimes we need it in pretrial and sometimes we need it in drug court. And since Judge Walker has administrative responsibilities for both drug court and the pretrial services, we're proposing another 1,000 hours at about $16 an hour. And use that person to float between. We are maxed out in drug court because we can't take any more people because of all the, for lack of a better word, bookkeeping that has to be done. Whether it's the docket entries or the documentation for all the grants we get in treatment court. But you don't need that person all the time. And so what I had talked about with Judge Walker is to get basically 1,000 hours that we could float between those two departments. And when they go to add on the computer system and transfer to that, everybody seems to think that we should get some efficiency when we get the monitoring computerized. Now, that remains to be seen. But that's the second place that we're asking for some new county money other than inflation, would be down at pretrial. And like I said, we would propose to float this person with treatment court because we can't add any money to treatment court. But I've got need because I've got literally a 50% increase in felonies. So we could take more people in treatment court. And we have more people who could benefit from treatment court. We just, by the time Katie goes over, we call it ranting because that's the name of the assessment, but assesses those people and they get back and do that part of it. She can only do so much of that because of the requirements of the documentation requirements for treatment court. So that's what we're proposing there. Pretrial expense-wise, they have a cellular phone that they trade off for being on call. We're gonna send them to some trainings, and that's just become more expensive because of gas and travel. We increased the office supplies because I think we bought one toner cartridge and spent almost all of it. And they've sort of been the redhead stepchild of the court system, so we kind of help them out there. But I'd like to try to get the expenses of pretrial in pretrial so that we can fairly evaluate what it is. That's why the increase is there. We increased the monitor money a little bit simply because we've just got more people. I think from a workload point of view, we're probably where we need another pretrial officer. We were at 200 when we went to 4 FTEs, and we're at 260 now. So what we thought we'd do is let's see if we can get some efficiencies and economies out of the computerization first before we come back and look at that. But
So do they come in and check in every week, or does it
Depends
depend
upon
on
the
what?
level of supervision. Sometimes it's a weekly call-in, sometimes it's a weekly show-up. Periodically, we'll have people who have to show up daily because they're essentially homeless and we can't use GPS on them or something else like that. But right now we're supervising 260 people with 4 people. And that's probably too many people per person. I know the judges were frustrated because for us to get the report that says Harry hasn't checked in, okay, well, Harry hasn't checked in for 3 or 4 weeks. Well, we think that that's important to the program. We know that Harry doesn't check in today, so tomorrow I can issue a warrant, and then on Friday, we can talk to Harry about why he's not showing up. And, the getting over there to getting the assessments done, to getting the reports done on these people, that just all takes time. Now,
Will that new software then, will they
They
be able to
think so.
check in?
yeah, it's part of it.
Sometimes they just check in with a phone call.
Right. So the new software is supposed to help with that. The sheriff has helped us getting the software. I think the bids are done.
But you don't have 240 of them checking in every day.
No.
So I'm not necessarily wanting to add people. So,
No, well,
and
and
I
we're not-
understand you're saying they
we're-
got more of a workload, but I just
Right.
feel like,
Yeah, we're not, at this point, we're not asking to add another pretrial officer, okay? We're asking for some part-time help through this transition, and I want to share that part-time help with drug court. So I have an half FTE now that we've used, and that's Mary Ann. Okay, I'm asking for another half FTE. We recognize you can't use anybody more than 29 hours a week. You know, otherwise, the benefits of part-time are lost. But that's what we would be asking, and we would flex that person between pretrial and drug court.
okay, so you're talking about Mary Ann, but in one of the paperwork, it showed converting from the part-time to the full-time,
That
so
was-
you're going back
That is
now.
that is what pretrial asked for, and that's why I sent that
Okay.
over, so you would know what they asked for.
I guess
But,
that's why I'm getting confused on
Yeah.
some of this, because we've got some
right,
different paperwork.
I'm not asking for another officer now.
Okay,
Okay, what I'm asking for is 1,000 hours apart of the computer. But we really want to see, I mean, they really think it's going to save them some time. We want to see what the computer system
hope
does.
so.
Well, yes, you would hope so.
so do they have a report of how many people do not check in, how many of them we have to revoke their pretrial release on, or
I would say
anything like
that in any given week, I see two. I have a third of the felony docket. I would assume Judge Green would see a couple of them. I would assume Judge Walker would see a couple of them, and then I don't know what they've got downstairs. Okay?
They usually just forget to check in, or?
Well,
it's-
well, mainly we're getting them when they get rearrested, okay? And we were, you know, if you got rearrested for an offense while you were on pretrial, we'll bring you back in and we'll figure out what we're not doing right. The check-in stuff, you know, it's just slow coming because it's the lower priority. The higher priority, it's the lower priority with pretrial because they have to assess the people, they have to go meet them, they have to go check all their stuff out then, and do those sort of things like that. You know, from the judge's point of view, we're kind of bigger on the check-in part of it because that's the hammer we've got. But I mean, they got 260 people.
I'm getting down probably in the weeds, but if they get arrested again and they're on pretrial, how many strikes do they get at that point?
Not very many.
Okay.
But it depends upon the offense. I mean, we get
pretrial,
a-
we're trying to help them, and then if they go
We-
get arrested again,
But.
well, that's just stupid.
There are
and-
stupid,
and-
there's some stupid.
Well, you know,
especially if they're-
it's not per se, if you got arrested for something that occurred a year and a half ago, okay?
Prior to your admission.
Prior to you being on pretrial. You know, I mean, one of the problems with pretrial is the length of time on pretrial, and that's the length of case disposition. And that's an entirely different discussion. But, you know, generally, if you get a rearrest on pretrial, you could sit there until we could figure out, is there something different we could do?
Is there a standard number of months, whatever, to be on pretrial? I mean, an average?
Well, I know pretrial reevaluates them after 90 to 120 days, like if they're on the monitor, and we've had no issues on the monitor. Now, we get people who get arrested with the monitor on, that's a different problem. But after about 120 days, if they've been successful in pretrial and the reporting part of it, pretrial will come to us and say, could we remove the monitor? Because that's an expense that we don't think is necessary. I can tell you the Kentucky statistics on pretrial and predictivity assumed 120 days from arrest to disposition. I think we were at 289, and that's after the case gets upstairs.
But that was to do with more with COVID. I mean, when we
Well-
first started this, didn't seem like they were on it for an extended amount of time. I mean, we were moving people through it.
Well, I don't know. I think there are several things that come. I'm not sure COVID is that much of a problem anymore. Like I said, that's a discussion that would probably take a while, and it has many moving parts. But I know that we all push really hard for case resolution. But to answer your question, no. So, I mean, you're also looking at the risk that's involved with it. For example, if we've got somebody who's on pretrial that is a major felony, we're gonna leave them on pretrial with the monitor for the duration because of the nature of the charge against them. Whereas some people, you're looking for, it's a domestic violence issue. Some people, there's various reasons that you would use electronic monitoring, for example, with that. And we're trying, we're constantly trying to re-educate our judges to look at, there are some people for whom pretrial, the only service we're offering is reminding them to come to court, which is a biggie. You can't dispose of your case if you don't come to court. So we go to the next page, which is Marshall's, the court security thing. I think when you look at the narrative part on that one, I've indicated, what parity looks like with the sheriff's department. And then we have an interim proposal, and those are the numbers that we have in there that would get us, towards parity, but not at parity like traditionally we've done that. We're gonna fast be at the point where the county money is greater than the state money. We have one state-funded position. And that offers us some advantage. And when we get when you get the county salaries get a little bit higher, is a state-funded position may no longer be the head marshal, and which actually allows us for some county retired people to serve as marshals without messing up their retirement. So, that's where I think that eventually ends up there. So when you look at the narrative that we submitted with that is, again, that's what it looks like with parity. We're kind of asking for an interim step there. To do that.
Just point out the difference, the request is a total of $280,000, but they all get a cell phone stipend, so the budget is $281,800.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
includes the cell phone
their budget has a
stipend.
cell phone stipend in it, whereas the cell phone that's in pretrial, they pass from whoever's on call for the weekend. So we propose, to moving the salaries on this. But we thought we'd take a couple steps.
Steve.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm gonna interrupt. This is our CEO of MAC, Steve Hobbs.
There are your newspapers.
You are, oh, I'll tell you what, Harry here, he twists,
He
yeah.
doesn't even have a good story. Good morning, Steve.
Yeah, do it.
Thank you,
We
Steve.
told him we need to get a better story. So.
Well, yeah, it's
I'm
my,
sorry to interrupt, but
No, you're
I had
fine.
those, and I just thought I'd bring them by to you.
you're a good man. Thank you. Paperboy, that's just,
Well, when somebody from Ladonia, Missouri, who is well-known, as that gentleman was,
yeah. We're working December 7th. We're gonna have a ceremony in Ladonia.
that's cool. I'll be,
Yeah, okay,
yeah, my dad went to school with some of his family.
yeah.
So Dad went to school at Ladonia High School. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
You're fine. It's just budget.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, I told him when I left the state and went to the county, and I said in my first budget meeting, I said, it's just all the same, just a lot more zeros at the state level.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
He's presiding commissioner of Audrain County. and-
Okay, so we're now looking at, were there questions how we did the salary stuff? Again, I've included the narrative from Holly, who's our head marshal, what parity looks like with the sheriff's department. We're asking that you move us in that direction, but maybe not the whole elephant at this time.
I was trying to figure out when the last time was we had some adjustments on the marshals. I know we did some pre-trial not too long ago.
Well, pretrial, I think we
And
did.
you're not
fairly-
asking, that's just COLA, so, on the marshals, and we had talked about it, and so you even said that you were gonna try to find some happy medium.
And that's kind of where we've done here. I mean, we are talking about people that are post-certified, they do make arrests, they do have to have all the training. And quite frankly, we need the experienced people, because we've tried the lower experienced people, and it's there's a lot of, our whole goal with court security is to not have a problem. Okay, and so I need people, this is why we use a lot of retired officers who've got that street experience to, keep things from getting out of control. So that's how we reach those numbers. The part-time numbers are when, for example, I used Donnie a couple days in this other trial, because during deliberations, a marshal has to sit outside the door. Now, it's not a big problem here in this building where I've got 6 marshals in the building. When I was at the federal courthouse, poor Scott, he couldn't go anywhere. We could bring him his lunch, but the other needs that he had, we really couldn't solve for him. So Donnie came over and covered through lunch and that part of it. The first couple days is getting people in and out of the building. It was an extra set of hands, but we're not using them all the time. But, for the cases that we come up that require more supervision in the courtroom, and we've got some criminal cases that are going to do that. What we don't have in there, of course, is, but we are tracking it, because I saw one report, we're tracking it. Like I said, there will be no capital murder case in 2023. The public defender is not available to try it. So it'll be 2024 before we get back to that. Now, we'll continue to work. There's work that gets done in all these cases. But, the short term is this gentleman's going to remain in the Cole County Jail for that time. They're not able to try the case in 2023. For its expenses on those sides, equipment maintenance, we raised that a little bit just because we're seeing some inflation. That's also, I believe, where we pay for the preventive maintenance on the x-ray machine. Comes out of that, and we don't want to lose another x-ray machine to lack of preventive maintenance. Meetings, travels, and dues. We're required by statute to send, and I've got 4 now, and probably 6 I'll have that need to go to this program at FLETC. That's the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. They've not offered the court security program that the statute talks about. I mean, we're going to look to see if we can get the statute modified to kind of get us out of this requirement. But it's a free program, but you got to travel there back and forth. And so, that's where that number comes from.
I just point out you actually reduced meeting travel and dues quite a bit from your
Yeah,
last year's
we
request.
think the current information we have on what they're doing with the program, we think will be less. I mean, right now, we send everybody to virtual trainings. We send them to Sheriff's Association trainings. We try to get all those done locally. And that's why we've lowered that number. But, I mean, airfare is going to be airfare if we actually go down there. Mileage, office supplies, again, we're seeing increase in toner and paper and those sorts of things like that. Bailiffs miscellaneous, that's where we pay for the ammunition for training, some things like that, little items. Sometimes it's the battery for the taser collars and things like that. So, professional services, that's the contract security service. Now, the projection was pretty high. I think there was still some COVID left in that. Okay? That gets rebid this year. So that is what it is. I'm hoping it won't be 90 because it's, been lower than that before. But that bid is up this year. Because I saw that came across my desk. So that number is, that's sort of like communications, is it? It costs what it costs. But that's the line item that Securitas or Guardsman or whoever the contractor gets paid out of.
That really is very inexpensive.
Well, and quite frankly, we've got it down pretty good. The only thing that we had needed, we thought to support those guys was get them a video monitor for the elevator, so they kind of knew what they were walking into when they go out there and bring people in through the accessibility entrance. And Brian and I are working on getting that done. So we think we can get that done with a modicum of,
The only thing that might skew that is if we would find a location
well, we
out
wouldn't,
out of the courthouse, we would probably have to have security for that.
well, we would probably take marshals for that and use part-time marshals for that, because they can do more things.
Okay,
These
good.
guys can sit there at the gate and work a metal detector. But if we go to an off-site venue, we're not gonna move a magnetometer there. So, when we've looked at those and we've laid those out 2 or 3 different times during the pandemic, Donnie and I went to half a dozen places to try to see what it is. We just think we'd bring in an extra marshal.
Good.
And I think it would work something like we did at the federal courthouse, where once we got going, then we either support it with court administrative staff. But for example, we were looking at Judge Walker picking a jury at the same time that we were over there. And so our sort of non-marshal staff, court administrator and all of that, we're sort of tied up. So, but that's how we're handling the extra staff that we need. So I think are there questions about that? The last thing I included, sort of from a capital request point of view, I do need to point out that really, regardless of what we do anywhere else, we're losing ground in the large courtroom. I got wallpaper peeling off the walls, the chairs are worn, I got lights that don't work. I know that carpeting has not been replaced, certainly since I've been a judge, and I have to go way back to when I was a lawyer to remember when that courtroom got remodeled.
It has character.
It does have character, but, at some point, we're gonna lose ground quicker, but, but anybody hasn't seen it, if you let me know, you're welcome to come in and see that. The second thing is, we have a number of computers that are county computers whose warranties are expiring. And we need to upgrade them to keep them sort of in sync with OSCA. That cost will not exceed $18,000. I need to get it done by the end of the first quarter of next year. We could do it now, depending on where you are. But these are primarily marshals, pretrial, court reporter laptops, the bench machines, the computers we have on the bench in the courtroom, and the recording machines, the computers that we use for the sound recordings. But we did this about, I'm thinking about 4 years ago. It's either 4 or 5 years ago.
I don't remember. We need to talk to Brian about that too, because do we usually have that in his budget, Debbie, do you remember?
We've just been back and forth with the courts. Sometimes the state buys them, sometimes we buy them.
We buy them all, they're all in the state contract, so that the machines are consistent with that, so I think that, but that's what it looked like it was gonna take. I know it won't exceed that number. So we're asking for that specifically. The third item would be a portable air conditioner for the jury room. You could do it with a split unit, but I think that would look pretty rough hanging it on the side of the building. And they make some fairly good size. You're talking about 14,000 BTU, 15,000 BTU to do that. But that room is stifling, to say the least, in the summers. And then when you have to shut the door for jury deliberations. So, I don't know if that would be overly expensive, but you have to pull a circuit, and I don't know what that entails in that building. I'm sure it's like at my house, it's a fuse box that is full already. But that's something that we think would really make a difference. Again, we'd like to talk about a second floor detention area. And the last thing is space, and space generally we need. We can conduct 2 jury trials sometimes in this building, depending on the trial itself. And I think you've all been upstairs. We tend to have these trials where there's 8, 9 lawyers or 8 or 9 parties. And those are very hard to do in the smaller courtrooms. Plus, we gave up our jury assembly area to Judge Green to do that. And so, but a couple things I'd like to ask the commission, at least to go get some estimates on, was room 400, which is the room where the prosecutor was when I started as a lawyer. It's on the 4th floor. It's the wraparound, what used to be the gallery in the courtroom. Okay, and so there's a desk there, and then Holly's desk is there, and there's a little tiny office, the corner office. I had to put 2 court reporters in that office because it's the only place I had for them. Then treatment court, a conference room that we use. I need a second room for lawyers during a trial. I can use the witness room downstairs in my courtroom for one trial, but that's for only good for one side. And then we're using a conference room, and then there's treatment court. When I worked for Callahan as a law student, that was 4 offices. And now it's 2 longer offices, and we'd like to at least look at maybe make them back into 4 smaller offices. But you gotta figure out how the windows line up and how the the heating and air units line up. But they were 4 offices because, I mean, I remember that, to look at that part of it. But again, like I said, we lost 2 clerk offices, which was basically 3 seats. That's Judge Green's office and secretary area now. We gave up the court reporter office downstairs. I think Donnell's got 2 or 3 people in that room. And then I suspect we're gonna get more clerks. We're looking now, I mean, Mark may have an opinion on this, I just haven't got to that yet. We're looking to see what remote work we could do. Possibly this Monsanto stuff could be done, some of it remotely.
Ideally, if we could move the treasurer, but I know he wants to stay there. I don't know where we would move him. But that's up on 400, the fourth
Yeah, I mean, that's
floor.
an area that would be ideal for
Yeah, but
use.
We'd have to do something over at Adams.
I just don't know where.
I don't think we have room anywhere else. I mean, it's an option.
So that's sort of what we're looking at here, so
Whose job, I guess, since I'm new, if, every office that wants a capital request, should there be a list with numbers? I mean, you've got narrative, but there's, you only got the 18,000.
right, I mean, some of that stuff I don't know. I mean, like when we looked at the water filters, Greg had a way to do it that was less expensive. But I don't want to be, asking Greg to go get a bid on something without talking to you guys and
We can direct Greg
Yeah.
to look at
Put
a
numbers on there.
portable AC. They do make a lot of different units now that are fairly inexpensive. And so, if my fellow commissioners want, I can talk to Greg and have him just come up with some prices.
Have him come up with a range on each of the items that the judges.
like, so the one that I've got, I know what the bids are because I can see the purchase orders, is what it's going to take to do the computer replacement. And that's assuming they don't go up. $18,000 should cover it, and it costs whatever it costs. I'm thinking it's a little.
Okay, I'll ask Greg.
Okay. So, can I just kind of, just kind of try and get to summing this up. Basically, your budget, the court budget for last year was $990,301. That's the 2022 amended budget. Bottom line there, total appropriation. Your 2023 budget request is $1,045,060. That's
Yeah, so
bottom
we're,
line that I see as far as appropriations.
so that's $55,000, a little bit less than that.
I did a little rough and dirty math on the revenue for 22 projected, or at least budgeted, was 105. It goes to 117, rounded. thousand. And as Mark said, on the expense side, 990 goes to 1045. So the difference is an increase of 43,000, and that 43,000 represents about a 4.86% net additional cost. When we're considering a lot of it's locked in at salaries of 4%, it's a pretty reasonable number.
I mean, historically, we've tried to, to not spend, frivolously or recklessly. We've tried to, keep the stuff fairly bare bones. But like several things ran into, like for pretrial, we increased the mileage on pretrial because they spent $300 on mileage going to get monitors. And the mileage has gone up, gas has gone up, and that's why we kind of bumped. Most of the numbers that we bumped that we did not specifically talk about were really a function of inflation, which we don't have any control over either.
So, this is your request.
Yes.
It gets pretty much locked in, other than if we change the COLA. Is that?
Right, the COLA, the COLA for pretrial, we're asking you for whatever COLA you're doing for the county people. I think they're entitled to a COLA increase, but I think we're where we want to be with salaries.
We'll probably, I've only been through this one time, and a year ago, the prior auditor started with 4, and before we
Yeah.
were going to adopt it, the governor went on record saying he was submitting a budget for 5.5. So we tried that, it fit, so we did a 5.5 a year ago. So we'll see. You got to run the numbers for each elected official, or each department within some of the elected officials, and see how it comes out as to how we'll stay.
And that's how you make the decision.
And maybe even whatever the governor says he's going
Yeah.
to project, that's also a factor.
I'd like some feedback. We're asking really for an FTE and part-time, okay? But half of it, increase in part-time. Half of it would be over what the clerk's office originally wanted to ask for. And we think that we could use that for transition, and then half of it I would split between pretrial and the marshals, and I'd look for some thoughts on that. That's included in that number.
We've been trying to get rid of that position.
I understand, and,
Well-
and quite frankly,
But if
when
it's,
Donnell came in and asked, she had reduced the number down to about a quarter, okay? Because we still are doing some microfilm and some stuff like that. I asked that number be increased because I think we're going to need it. And then I would, like I said, what January looks like versus December, I don't really know. But that's why I put that in there.
but if we eliminate the part for doing the microfilming and it moved into helping do the other clerk work, instead of, you're wanting to turn it from a part-time to a full-time, right?
Well, I'm talking about
2
2,000, I'm
part-times.
talking about 2,000 hours, but I'm not talking about,
2 1,000 hour.
2 1,000
Yeah.
hours, We're cognizant of that, and we think that that's out there to get. It probably costs us about $16 an hour, but we're cognizant that you can't use anybody more than 29 hours a week without incurring.
And that FTE that Donnell had was actually doing a lot of other things besides the microfilming kind of became secondary. We might do better just to hire some group to come in and just do all the microfilming and be done with it.
I wrote notes on mine. I can get you a clean copy though.
But,
Okay. So, I just understand what that is that's the request from the 2 departments and what we're doing. So, that's, and Donnell, in all fairness to Donnell asked that come down to about, I think, quarter time is I think what she had asked for that. Because when I went in there, I said, hey, I'm about to go explain why this is, and that's what she had asked for. I raised it because I thought that given everything that was going on, we're gonna need the help in there, and we're not gonna get it out of the state. And at the same time, while I've not been able to talk to Mark about this, if we could make, maybe the focus of that position also be in making sure we're moving the county reimbursement issues.
Yeah, the Monsanto thing throws a challenge in there. Just,
Yeah.
I hate adding because it seems like it never goes away. So, and each part-time, that's a little easier to.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, when I said, hey, look, I'm gonna have to have some specific facts in here, because I'm not gonna go in here and get tomatoes thrown at me on this particular point. And what she came back with is, you know, cut that back to basically a quarter, and had, you know, recognizing that was, you know, the concerns the commission had before. So she had actually asked to be cut back. I raised it up because I thought we're going to need it.
I just, you and I had talked about the salary thing, and I appreciate you not coming in asking for the full parity salary. And it's still about 15% raise for them. And I know we have other people across the county we need to try to take care of too, and I don't know if I'm comfortable going a 15% raise on it before we know what we're going to be able to do for the rest of the employees. So that's what I'm wondering today, if we put this in the budget, is that concrete? I mean, can't change, or can it change? I don't know. I was reading the statutes that Jill sent us, and
The circuit court's office is treated differently than all the other
Any other
budgets that we do. We have to acquire, really today is sort of the fail-safe day. Or is it tomorrow?
15 days prior to
Yeah.
September 1.
Yeah, okay, tomorrow.
You know.
But this 15% that you're, where's your, how do you get that 15%?
I was taking the 47,475 current salary to the proposed salary of 55,000. So that's, I just divided the 55,000 by the 47,475, come up with the 1.15. So
And what,
it's an $8,000, $7,500 raise.
on the, or you were talking about the court security salaries?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I took the math of 264 a year ago, right?
You're just taking I'm going off the individual salary is what I was looking at.
Yeah, some individuals will get
Oh, okay.
about 15%. In total, it's only,
Yeah, I mean, the bottom number, whenever you see the bottom number, and like you said, that's not a huge or an unreasonable amount overall,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I took the 264 on the salary line for the court security. 264 times 104, 1.04% is 275. The ask is 282, so that's 7,000, right? But on top of the COLA. And now, maybe you may have pulled that part-time and, no, you didn't.
I was just going from the 47,475 to the 55,000, and we have.
Oh, okay, you're looking at the individual, yeah, all right, gotcha.
And it was gonna go, current salary from 250 and some change to 280, which part of it's going down because the one that's retiring and their replacement would come back in at the 55, so that's just what I was using.
I think overall, this is a very reasonable budget. So.
Well, and I'm not saying it's not overall reasonable budget, just when we have everybody else gonna come in later on and ask for their raises, they're gonna want adjustments 15% as well. We've done some already. We've got the sheriff's portion of his, we got some juvenile officers. We did some EMS this year too, right? So, I mean, we're making some big jumps here, so. But like I said, overall, it's a very reasonable budget. I struggle with the budget adjustments, and I try to do them, prefer to do them in steps. I've lost a couple of votes on those, and I'll say my piece, and so.
Oh, and when we tried to come in, I mean, you know, we're still talking about a number that I got everybody below what a new road deputy makes. And then certainly in court security, I've got people with a lot more experience than that. I mean, there's pros and cons. I mean, there's benefits to this job
We
that you're
can
not.
get the road deputies in here, or get marshals in here, and let them
Yeah.
argue it out
There-
about who should
there's-
get paid more.
There is difference between a road deputy.
Right.
And, you know, there,
But,
it's,
you know, we're in a business where experience counts, and we've tried it the other way, and it didn't go as well as we wanted it to. So,
Are we looking for a motion?
no, I mean, I mean, really wanted to,
Okay.
the part-time part is the part that, you know,
Do you think it needs motion? I mean, it's just, the request is just gonna go in.
you're
overall
just, you're
budget.
accepting
We
now
cannot change the request after.
without the consent of the court.
Tomorrow, yeah, without the consent.
So silence,
Difficult.
silence is taken as accepting the column, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth column, the 2023 requested budget. Our silence is deemed acceptance of those numbers.
I mean.
I'm not even sure it's that, but it's,
I don't think you need to accept it at all. It's just discussion, presentation of his budget.
okay.
and I'm looking for feedback. I mean, what we were talking about doing with the part-time stuff is the newest, the inflation stuff and the salaries. We've had that conversation, but I mean, where are you guys on part-time hours?
I was prepared to argue against the 16,000, but you've explained some things, and then with the change of a new circuit clerk, I don't want to squeeze the new one too hard coming in. What I would like to see as it unfolds is the hope for reduction in time spent or expenses incurred with this implementation of some new software. I'd like to see if you could track that, or your folks could, those folks
Okay.
could track that.
I will ask for that. I mean, that's everybody's hope. Okay, and when I went to the discussion, you know, if you look at their narrative, they talked about converting something to a full-time position. I thought they wanted to convert Mary Ann to a full-time position, but Richard said it's not that. But if you look at the numbers alone, okay, we went, you know, essentially 50 per person to 260 divided by 4, which is,
65.
you know, 60 plus. It's almost, you know, 60 plus people per person. The workload has definitely increased, and what it shows is it delays the information to us to make the decisions. And they seemed reasonably confident that they would get some efficiencies out of the software. So that's why I didn't come here and ask for another person, although I think the numbers clearly justify it. But I thought some part-time clerical help that we could spread between pretrial and drug court, because with with a 50% increase in felonies, you would like to think that there would be some more candidates for drug court.
Mhm.
Okay, but we're about maxed out in how many cases we can handle.
But if we didn't have the pretrial that's handling 260 people, we'd be in bigger trouble,
Yeah.
wouldn't we?
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
of
the majority of those people would be
incarcerated?
incarcerated.
We'd be housed in elsewhere. too.
Yeah. So we're, you know, the biggest thing, I mean, the most successful pretrial is rapid case disposition, which is a discussion that I don't think is a budget, well, not in my budget.
Okay.
But that's,
That's where we gotta get all the parties to the table, because when you're not all at the same table, everybody blames on somebody else. They don't have
I
enough
think
public
that's, I
defenders,
think,
they don't
I
have
think,
enough-
I think that there's a lot of merit to having a discussion like that, because, you know,
Get it all out on the table.
we're not lacking for opportunities to try jury trials. You know, probably this year, I've had to kill 3 civil jury trials for the potential of a criminal jury trial, which is unfair to the citizen of Cole County who has a claim that he'd like to have presented to the court, but I'm stuck with, and then, you know, I put that case off because we're gonna try criminal cases, and then they either get resolved or don't go, which is not, I don't have a lot of, I have substantively less control in a criminal case than I do in a civil case. So. But I really was looking for some feedback on the part-time people, and if I'm reading everybody right, let's take a look at this, and Harry, I think your point is well taken, to see if we can actually show some economies. Thank you for your time. I commend you to the donuts.
Thank you, Judge.
All righty, thank you.
But you take one.
No, I didn't.
No?
No. You'll have
So-
people in here.
Yeah, I don't want to travel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
As far as getting in the public
Motion
record,
to adjourn?
get
yes,
the
can I recess?
schedule.
Do we do that on a special?
Oh, okay.
I think
We did,
so.
okay.
All right, motion to adjourn and stand in recess until 4:30.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hey, Jeff?
Yeah.
You want to see that, what you had emailed me on?
Yeah.